Today's conversation is one of incredible courage, resilience, and purpose, born from pain. My guest is Angela Kennecke, an award-winning journalist and the founder of Emily's Hope, a nonprofit committed to breaking the stigma around substance use disorder and saving lives through education, awareness, and recovery support. You see, Angela's life changed forever when her 21-year-old daughter, Emily, died of fentanyl poisoning just days before the family planned to get her into treatment. Rather than retreat in silence, Angela chose to speak out and act. Her advocacy has sparked a movement that's making a real difference in how we view, talk about, and respond to addiction. We're going to talk about transforming personal loss into meaningful change, the realities of the fentanyl crisis, and how her work is empowering youth and families alike. This is a very powerful story of grief and grace, and it's one you don't want to miss. Hi, Angela. Welcome to the podcast today. I just read a very touching intro about you to bring you on, and I am sure that everybody listening to the podcast is deeply moved and touched and saddened by what you experienced. And I don't know, can you help me in this situation? I mean, I know people say, I'm so sorry for your loss, or my deepest sympathies. But I mean, is there anything that can really be said, or has there ever been something that was said to you in that moment that really resonated or touched you? I feel like sometimes there are just no words, right, to explain this kind of loss.
Right. I don't think there are words that are adequate enough, right? I
Right.
always say I'm a wordsmith. I write for a living, or I've
Sure.
written for a living for like 35 years, and I couldn't even put my
Mm.
emotions into words. And I think for people, especially if you've never experienced such a horrific loss of a child, right? You don't know what to say to somebody. And I think the thing that you can do is say, I'm sorry, and show up. I think your
Mm.
presence means more than your words.
That's very well put, and I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, you endured something that it's every parent's worst nightmare, right, Angela? I mean, nobody can imagine what that is like. And before we delve into all of that, I really want to know about your daughter Emily. I want to know, what was she like? What lit her world? What Tell us about her so we can feel that sense of connection.
Well, thank you for asking about her. Not everybody does. And I do really enjoy talking about her.
Mm.
It keeps her spirit alive, right?
Yes.
And she was my firstborn. She was extremely high needs, fussy baby, like right from the beginning. Like
Hmm.
she took all my energy and all my time, and she always did, sort of.
Yeah.
She was really gifted. She
Mm.
was brilliant. She was an artist. She was a gymnast. She
Mm.
did hurdles and track, just all the things. Like I always told her, with all these gifts that you have great responsibility, to the world with all these gifts. And I would always tell her how lucky I was to be her mom, am to be her mom. And I loved the heck out of that kid, and she was very strong-willed, always very strong-willed. And for us, the rebellion really started in high school. And her dad and I are divorced, and that caused some issues because there were different parenting styles, right? We weren't on the same page. And
Yes.
when she started rebelling and sneaking out and things like that, and all I saw was that this was going to lead to pain, and I just didn't want to see her get into any kind of trouble. But really, for us, the issue started in high school, about 16 years old.
Yeah. I think parents just have a really hard time discerning between what's like typical rebellion and when is it tipping over. How were you trying to address that? And I think a lot of us can relate to different parenting styles from different households, right? If that's an uphill battle when you're
Yeah.
trying to bring home a message and maybe it's not being bolstered, or maybe it's very strong on one side, not as strong on the other. So walk us through when you started to feel that ping as a parent of, oh, I think this is a little bit more than teenage rebellion.
She was my oldest out of four kids. So I didn't really know what to expect, right?
Hmm.
And then I saw later her brother and her sister didn't do those things, the things that she did.
Hmm.
But at the time, like I didn't know that. They were just little kids. And she started rebelling and doing, I thought, some pretty extreme things. And so I knew it was not going well. And I took her to lots of different counselors. And then I did things that were really hard to do. I was the bad cop, and where
Mhm.
her dad was more like the good cop. So that didn't work out so well for me. It made her just resist me all the more. Although I have to say that as she got older and into college, we became a lot closer. Again, she would, come over all the time for holidays and on her lunch breaks at work and things like that. And but there were some really difficult high school years there. But that is when she started using substances, and we know that substances are not for the developing brain. And I knew
Mhm.
that. And as a journalist, I had done stories about things
Mhm.
that had happened to kids, and I had been doing stories on the opioid crisis. And so I knew that this was not a good situation. I just didn't have the right tools to stop it. And I don't know, as parents, we like
Mhm.
to think we're all powerful, right? Our
Sure.
brain wants to think we can control things, but we really can't all the time.
Yeah. It's, interesting you mentioned that. I was a journalist too at this time that you're speaking of. And I remembered covering those stories as well. And I would send links to my son. And I'm like, hey, pay attention to this, or something would happen in Houston to a teenager with an overdose, or just tried something and it had fentanyl in it. And he would say to me, oh, I know, it's all around. I'm aware. There's this awareness of it. And it's interesting because the rebellion of our generation is very different of the rebellion of this generation, right? And
Right.
the
Yes.
exposure to all of these things that, we need to talk about, because I don't think a lot of parents or grandparents are aware of the different types of substances that are out there and what is potentially in these substances. So, what were you discovering during this journey?
Well, I to your point, I would have friends say to me, "Oh, I had a sister who was a rebel and she turned
Mhm.
out fine." I went and did these things when I was younger, and look at me, I'm fine today.
Right.
Whatever it might be. And that's not really the case today. Today, just experimentation can be a death sentence with fentanyl, in the drug supply and the illicit drug supply and pills that look like the real thing. And certainly I didn't know as much about fentanyl as I do now. I knew about opioids, but I didn't know as much about fentanyl. And I had talks with her, especially about meth. I had done a special about meth, and in third grade, I made her sit down and watch it. And she always hated meth and would talk down about meth users. And I always say she never got the entire story or the entire picture, which we can get into this later. But that's where the idea for our Emily's Hope substance use prevention curriculum came from. Where I thought, oh my gosh, she learned all this stuff in third grade, but she didn't learn everything. Like, I didn't teach her everything that she needed to learn. And so I knew about that she was using marijuana, and I knew that she was experimenting with Xanax pills. And so I was doing my best to try to stop that. Of course, a lot of people just think, well, weed is just weed and it's fine. But we know it's not for the developing brain. And I don't really think I ever had any luck in completely getting her off of substances. There may have been short periods of times where she stopped, but then when she was 21, she used heroin, and I didn't know. We were planning an intervention. We were 3 days away from holding an intervention because we knew something had just really taken a turn for the worse. And that is when she died. The heroin was laced with fentanyl, and she didn't know it.
You know, man, that's landing on so many people right now, and is so horrifying and so scary. And I listen to you, and people are listening to you, and they're looking at you, and they're like, wow, this is a smart, educated mom who sought therapy for her child, who did everything to educate her child about all of the ramifications. I mean, to everybody listening and watching, you did everything right. But we can't negate the pain of a child and just how far they may be willing to go. And also we assume that they think the way we think, that they're using
Right.
logical brain, but they're not. It's not developed yet. And if a child is in pain or is in experimental mode, it's that one time, that one instance that could literally take them over the brink and put them in situations, and parents in situations like these. And it just breaks my heart, listening to this. I mean, I'm the parent of a now 20-year-old. Tell us, Angela, when this happened. How long ago was this for you?
So it was 7 years ago, and Emily was 21. 2018, May 16th of 2018. A really tough date that just passed for me.
Yes.
You're right, though. I mean, this is something that you wouldn't expect is going to happen, to your child. You can't prepare for it. We were trying to do everything. We don't have as much power, I think, as parents as we like to think we do.
Mm-hmm.
So peers have a lot more influence. Social media, of course, has so much influence, and our kids are going to sometimes do what they're going to do, right? And no matter what we do, we can't control it. So all we can control is our response.
Correct.
That's it.
Yeah, and obviously you sensed. Were you on board with your ex-husband, her father, when it came to, okay, we're kind of at a critical time here. We need to get in. I mean, was there at least unison and everybody on the same page at that point?
I would say at that point, yes.
Okay.
He was planning the intervention with us. I'm remarried, so it was my husband and him and our other children. We all met with the interventionist, and we were actually, on the day that she died, that was the day we were writing our letters that we were going to read to her. Just a typical intervention that you probably see on TV and that kind of thing, but we never got that chance. And that's why I always say, if it weren't for fentanyl,
Yeah.
I mean, it is a death sentence. And now we have carfentanil out there, which is even more powerful than fentanyl, and things like xylazine. And parents and grandparents both really need to be informed, and they need to talk to their kids. And these conversations need to start really young. And science backs that up, that we need to start talking to kids young ages.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. When you think about what our children are exposed to now, you give them a cell phone and you have given them a pathway to all kinds of things that their young minds really aren't prepared to handle and to deal with. And so if there's all this exposure to bad language, pornography, drugs, all of that, or being exposed just to be able to be contacted online, then to be able to kind of retreat and be like an ostrich with a head in the sand and think, well, it's too soon to have these conversations. You make that point very clear. It is not too soon to have these conversations. And it's not about instilling fear. It's about the truth.
No. And I think that's, you've got to tell your kids also what substances do to their brains and their bodies, right? So that they understand. They want to protect, younger kids especially want to protect their brains and their bodies. They don't want to do anything to hurt themselves. And I think if you can start those lessons younger, it's so important. I mean, just critical, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a quick break, Angela, and thank you first of all, thank you just for being here. I know it's probably not easy to talk about this and to share this story, especially as we are around this anniversary date for you. So thank you for your presence and your conversation. And it's my hope that this helps to save lives. It's my hope, and we're going to talk more about your charity, but it's my hope that this is going to raise awareness, conversation, and maybe give direction to families where they feel that ping, like something's not right here, but they're sitting back and they're not talking and they're not moving. This is a call to action, to talk, to move, and to get going. Angela Kennecke is my guest today, and we are talking about her daughter, Emily, who tragically passed away from heroin that was laced with fentanyl. We're going to have more on this conversation right after the break. You hear me talk a lot on this podcast about the importance of sleep, winding down, and calming ourselves. Speaking of Calm, can I tell you that Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, giving you the power to calm your mind and change your life. I've even done dedicated podcasts just on meditating and prayer and how important it is to prioritize rest in this stage of our lives, any stage, in fact. The Calm app has a variety of content like guided meditations to help you work through your anxiety and stress, boost your focus, build healthier habits, and take better care of your physical well-being. Even lovely sleep stories and meditations, calming music, if that's what you need to help you drift off to a restful sleep. There are grounding exercises to help you reset and relax when you feel overwhelmed, and expert-led talks. This will help you handle grief better, improve your self-esteem, improve relationships, and so much more. Calm has an exclusive offer just for our listeners of our show. Get 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/over50. That is an amazing value. Go to calm.com/over50 for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. calm.com/over50 and tell Calm you heard about them from me. Welcome back. We are having a very heartfelt conversation about a terrible loss, the loss of a child. Angela Kennecke is my guest today. Angela, you are steeped in journalism history. You are a mom, and you have been through an unspeakable tragedy of losing your 21-year-old daughter to fentanyl. I'd like to get into there's so much to talk about here. First of all, thank you again for sharing your story with us. You started a charity called Emily's Hope Charity. And it's a resource for a lot of people, but it's also an outlet for you. You mentioned earlier you're a writer. And I truly, as a fellow journalist, I am a believer in that cathartic process that comes from writing and sharing your thoughts. So talk to us about the opportunity that is for you to be able to get your thoughts out there and your hope in how it's going to land on people.
Well, I started blogging like right away after Emily's death. In fact, I put my first Facebook post as one of my first blogs, and it was called Forever 21.
Mm.
And I just could not stop writing, especially in the beginning. Just different things would happen. And I'm like, oh, I got to write about this. And I'd have different feelings and be in different situations, and healing things would happen. I mean, all kinds of things. And so I thought I need to write about this because there are so many other parents going through what I've been through. And that number just continued to grow. Now, this last year is the first year we saw overdose numbers go down nationwide, overdose and fentanyl poisoning deaths go down nationwide, but still 80,000 people, way too many people, right? So many parents are in the same boat as me, and so many young people. Fentanyl, the number one killer of young people, 18 to 45. And I just knew that if I could get it down on paper, what I was feeling, that would resonate with so many other people going through a similar path. And not, of course, everyone's grief can be different, but many people have told me that it's helped them so much. And that's the only reason why I do it. It doesn't, I write them and I put them on there. And eventually I'm working on it right now and turning all those blogs into a book, because I think just take it from the beginning and then include some of the stories and things that happened along the way would be important for people to be able to read in one piece of work.
I agree. I think that will be helpful for so many, not only cathartic for you, but life-changing for others. Let's talk a little bit about grief. Quite the journey, isn't it? You just talked about that milestone that you marked with her loss. How are you navigating grief? What are you even noticing in that process?
Well, boy, what I've noticed most about grief is that you can't run from it. You can't hide from it. You can't try to smother it or do away with it. You really have to go through it. You have to go directly into it, feel it, fall on the floor and cry if that's what you have to do for as long as it takes until you can pick yourself back up again and move on. And you're going to feel those waves of grief over periods of time, and they're going to be different, right? Sometimes they're going to be really strong. And sometimes I cry for like a minute or 2 minutes, and then I move on with my day. Something triggers my grief and I move on with my day. I actually became a certified grief educator in this whole process because I now lead a support group of parents just like me. And sadly, those numbers grow. Every month we get new members to our support group. But I've learned so much about grief, and I'm not afraid of it, I think, the way that I used to be before I really experienced it. But I don't want more of it. It's not that I want to experience more of it, but I understand it. And it is really love, right? Grief is love. It's rooted in love.
That's a great way to put it. It's true. And we wouldn't feel if we didn't love. And it is a journey through, and it's a journey for a lifetime. And, we just have to, I guess, wrap our hearts around that, because it is coming from a place of love. Tell us about the charity. How long after her passing? Obviously, you started writing. That was this outlet for you. When did you realize, there's something here? And not only, and I know a lot of this is the journalist in you, but we need to reach people. We need outreach, and we need information to get out there. So walk us through that process.
Well, it was she died in May and I started the charity in February, and I was still working in television at the time. I just left a couple of years ago and to do this full time because it had sort of taken over my life. But I knew I had a platform, and I knew over the years as a TV news anchor, I was an investigative journalist. I had asked so many people to talk to me like you did, right? After the worst things had happened to them. And I just thought, I can't hide from this. I can't conceal this and pretend like it didn't happen. And I didn't want other people telling my daughter's story either. And
Mm,
because, that leads to a lot of misinformation.
absolutely.
So I just thought, I'm going to own it. And I started telling it. And the response I got was overwhelming. And the charity just started with me setting up a fund to get people into treatment at an addiction care center in my community. And actually, we have now provided $500,000 in treatment scholarships to that center to date from then. But that's what it started with. And then it kept growing. I kept thinking, well, I could do this and I could start a podcast. So I started a podcast about grief called Grieving Out Loud.
Hmm.
And we also have that support group for parents. And we have a post overdose response team now that we respond to every survivor of overdose. We have our education curriculum, K through 12, in 5 states before thousands of students and growing phenomenally all across the country. That's one of the biggest things that we do. And just so many other things. I'm probably forgetting something off the top of my head. Our naloxone distribution program. We have a
Hmm.
youth program where we are targeting youth for prevention as well. So many things. And I have a team of people now helping me. That's the thing, is that I have not done this all by myself. And that is what has really helped me actually in my grief, is the people who have come alongside of me and supported my efforts. That has been the miracle, I think, in all of it.
Yeah. You know what I think too? Not everybody realizes how systemic of a problem this is. I'm from Houston, and as a news anchor in Houston, and especially as a community where so much of this stuff comes through and settles, it's very much a part of the conversation. It's sadly a part of news stories, a part of family stories. You feel that weight because it's talked about so frequently, because it happens so frequently. But this stuff is pushed everywhere. It's in every community. And I think that it is really, really important to think that just because you live in a smaller town, or it's, seemingly more peaceful or not as large as a big city, these drugs with fentanyl are in your town.
They are everywhere. And I have talked to students all across the country, thousands, tens of thousands of them in assemblies and things like that, and told Emily's story. And I've been in the smallest
Mhm.
of schools and the tiniest of towns. And one of them told me they had 3 kids overdose in their school. So no, with the internet and everything else, it doesn't matter where you live. It's everywhere. That's why we have to talk to our kids and teach our kids at such a young age. Nobody's immune from this.
Yeah. And it scares me because I am shocked as to how many children are willing to try. Do you know what I'm saying? I feel like when we grew up, there was almost this, I guess you would call it a self-protective mechanism, right? That there was something in you that said, I'm going to experiment, but I'm not going to go that far. I may try this, but I'm definitely not going to try that, because there was this fear. And I feel like there is, whether it is societal pressure, whether it is the enormous amount of pain that a lot of our children feel, or pressure from just growing up in this time, and this is not an easy time to be a child, there's something in our children that is allowing them to say yes to things that an automatic no should be taking over, right? I mean, do you feel that?
I think so. I think you've touched on a lot of things there. Our kids' mental health it should be at the forefront, right? We know there's a huge crisis there.
Hmm.
And also, we are in a pill happy society, right? And
Yes.
our kids have taken a lot of pills for different things, and we've given them a lot of pills for different things. So when the fentanyl is in these pills, they think that's okay. And also, like, their brains are not fully developed. They're more impulsive. They're, doing something. They're maybe feeling the pressure in the moment at a party or whatever it is, or they're feeling sad and lonely. And they think this pill is going to fix it because we've got pills to fix everything, right?
Right.
And so it is something that I think we've evolved into. And it's almost like the perfect storm, what
Yes.
you're talking about, to create the crisis that we're in right now with overdoses and fentanyl poisonings.
Absolutely. It sort of has become a culture of pain. It's like, my pain is worse than your. Everybody is talking about their pain. And to your point, it's normalized to medicate, and to medicate with anything that's available. And that's
Right.
exactly what they're doing. And we're seeing this terrible, terrible fallout. And I think too, Angela, maybe you can dispel some myths. Maybe parents think, well, fentanyl's only in these drugs, but not these
Oh,
drugs, right?
right.
It's in everything, is it not?
Everything illicit that you didn't get, from your pharmacist or your doctor or whatever. Yes. I mean, any kind of illicit drug, they're lacing it in uppers like cocaine, and even meth can be laced with fentanyl or carfentanil. And so, yeah, it's in everything. You just can't take anything. Our drug supply is tainted and it's deadly. I think
Mhm.
those are the two important things. All of our drug supply, the illicit drug supply.
Right. And the purpose of putting fentanyl in all these drugs is?
Yeah, I've asked that a lot. I was like, why do the cartels and the
Mhm.
organized crime, why do they want to kill their customers? And I've been told, well, the line's out the door. This is from the DEA. The line's out the door. So there's demand. And some people won't die. Fentanyl is highly addictive.
Mhm.
So if they don't die, their chances of becoming
More.
addicted are really, yeah, really great. And so then you've got a customer that'll come back. It's terrifying. And so we have a mental health and substance use disorder crisis on our hands as well. So, we have to treat all of it, right? We have to treat
Mhm.
people suffering from this so we can keep them alive too.
Right. It starts with these conversations. It starts with this awareness that it is everywhere. It is rampant. It is deadly. It is sinister. It's evil.
It is. It is.
So, to your point, these conversations need to be had. What types of educational materials, help parents get access, right? I'm sure through Emily's Hope Charity, you have that. What are you trying to provide parents to arm them with weapons against this fight?
Right. So we have information for parents. We have a page on our website called One Pill Can Kill that has all kinds of information. That's a DEA thing, One Pill Can Kill, but we've got all the information about what parents and caregivers need to know on our educational website, emilyshopeedu.org, which is our education curriculum. We also, people can get our books to read to their kids. We've got, first through eighth grade books. We've got comic books for the middle schoolers, and
Mm.
things that they can read to their kids and talk about it with them or their grandchildren. I've had a lot of grandparents buy these books too. It's just one way to start those conversations and to guide you, with what you need to know and what you can say.
That's what this is about, Angela, just giving parents and grandparents the tools to have these conversations, to get in there, and to have a system in place, because guaranteed our children, if they haven't done it, they know somebody who has. These are things that are happening. I don't care where you are. So the conversations about fentanyl need to be happening. They need to be happening right now. If you feel that your child is going through something, you talked about getting counseling for your daughter. She's a product of divorce. Many, many children are. Many children are in situations where they need guidance and counseling. How do you recommend that parents approach this issue? What if they can't afford counseling? What to do? Let's talk about intervention.
Right. So there are a lot of free resources out there. We have compiled a lot of resources on our website, emilyshope.charity, resources for someone suffering, a loved one of someone who is suffering from substance use disorder. But just when it comes to talking to your kids, start with your school counselor. If you feel like your child is having an issue, your school counselor is the expert, and that's free. Right. So maybe make an appointment with your school counselor, sit down and talk to them about your concerns, and have them bring in your child to talk to them. And you can go from there and get recommendations in your community. Certainly there are graduated scales for counseling. If someone can't afford it, you can find those people. They are available. Sometimes you have to hunt for a good counselor, right? And then that can be hard. I wish that it was just a really easy answer that I could give parents, like do A, B, and C, and everything will be fine. But I think keeping those lines of communication open, and not getting angry. The one thing I really
Mhm.
learned soon on with my daughter is when I did the bad cop stuff and the punishing stuff, it didn't really work. It just kind of pushed her further away from me. So I always started approaching her from a standpoint of love. And I thought, how would I want to be treated if I was going through this? If I was in this position, how would I want to be treated? And I always thought about that. And I'm so glad I did, because our relationship was close before she died. And our last text to each other were, I love you. And our last words to each other were, I love you. And so thank God, that I had changed my approach and I kept her in my life. And I think that's important. There's so much talk about enabling, and punishing. I think those are kind of old school ideas. And I don't think that works with our kids.
No, not whatsoever. And I can only imagine the peace that you have in knowing that that was your final exchange with her. And you're right. We can't punish the drug use out of them. No amount of timeout or you can't go to this party
Right.
is going to stop them from doing what they're doing. It is a medicating of a pain that requires a different approach. And I'm glad that you're bringing that up. You had talked about that you were at that point to seek intervention for her. Walk us through what that looks like, because there are many different types of intervention facilities. What were
Yes.
you hoping to provide for Emily?
So I had called a really well-known intervention place, a facility near me, and I'd balked at the cost. Actually, it was like $10,000 for intervention, and so I had done a little more research and had found a local counselor who did interventions, and our insurance would help cover part of it, and then
Mm.
we might have some cost involved, but that was okay with me. And so he had done a lot of them, and so I just got the whole family together and I said, we all agreed we had to do. We all saw, that something was not right. I never in a million years would have guessed she was doing heroin. To me, that's like, oh my gosh, the worst thing you could do in my mind. But it's much more common today. I think now you mostly find fentanyl on the streets, not heroin at all, but at that time. And so we just didn't know. We didn't know what it was, but we knew we had to act. And what I always say to people is don't wait. We were waiting, we're going to write our letters. We're doing the intervention on a Saturday when everybody was off work and we could, get together and do it. And I would just say, if you suspect something is wrong like this, because of the deadliness of the drug supply, you need to be urgent. Do whatever you can. Talk to the experts. Do your research. Go to credible sources and take steps. If you have to do an involuntary commitment for an adult, if you have a child, you don't have to do that. But if you
Mhm.
have to do that for an adult, do it, because I don't think you'll ever regret. Even if that person gets angry with you, you'll never regret taking all the steps that you can to save their life.
You mentioned earlier, and this was very intriguing, that you can be exposed to fentanyl and not die from it. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's just one bad batch that gets you. Is there a way as a parent to be able to get your child a blood test to see if they have fentanyl in their system to even know?
Yeah, I'm sure that you could. I think, we can drug test our kids. And I think there are different organizations and different things out there that will help you do that. I think that, yeah, it's really a tough thing. I'm not sure about like how those tests go or how long the fentanyl is in their system.
Right. Yeah. I just didn't know if there was a quick way to find out if your child is exposed to it. But naturally, there's going to be that rebellion too, on
Right.
dragging you in to get you tested. But again, as a parent, you've got to do things and act because you love and
And the
because you
other thing
care.
too, like you mentioned, you've got a 20-year-old, we have to prepare our college kids
That's
for
right.
this. And we know that illicit marijuana, not the kind you get from a dispensary, but the
Mm.
illegal stuff that's coming from China, first of all, sprayed with pesticides, really bad for you. But we know that that can be also laced with fentanyl as well. So
Mhm.
if your kid's going off to college, they're going to be at parties, they're going to be exposed, of course, to drinking. We expect that, right? But they're
Right.
also going to be exposed to marijuana and gummies and pills and things like that. So you have to have these conversations with them before they go. And you have to maybe have them sit down and watch a video. We've got lots of videos on our website too about this and what can happen.
Yeah. What else? I mean, that's fascinating. We're sitting here talking about drugs and fentanyl, not even thinking that pesticides would be involved. I mean, is there
Yeah.
anything else that you've learned through the DEA where you're like, whoa, what is going on out there?
Yeah, I learned something recently at a national family summit with the DEA in Washington, D.C. last November. They told us that people are always blaming Mexico and just the cartels for this problem that we're in. However, they told us that they were having trouble getting the precursors for fentanyl into Mexico. So they were actually sending them here to the United States to organized crime or gangs in the United States that are then sending them to the cartels in Mexico. Mexico is pressing it or not pressing it. They're making the fentanyl powder, sending the fentanyl powder back to the United States to the same criminals here who are pressing it into pills and then distributing it. Now that blew my mind because I always just thought, well, it's just coming up from
Through the
Mexico,
border.
however it gets
Mhm.
here, plane, ship, over the border, wherever. But that's not really the case, right? So we have Americans involved in this too. And that sort of blew my mind. really.
Yeah, it's a business for sure.
Hmm.
And it's in the business of destroying lives, not only our children, but adults too.
But our
But
children are especially vulnerable, right? They target our kids.
of course they do. Of course they do. They do it through social media. They do it through culture. It's really a sad state of affairs, and I'm grateful that we're having this conversation. What else can people get at your website, emily'shope.charity? If somebody feels like, okay, this is speaking some truth to me, and I need to get involved. What will they get? Where will they start?
So we have all kinds of resources, like I said, available there. We also have links to my blog. We have links to the podcast that I do, Grieving Out Loud, which is a once a week podcast where I talk to other parents like me. And we do
Mhm.
episodes on grief. And we also talk about addiction, and we talk to doctors and all kinds of people, So if you're experiencing something like this, I just want people to know that they're not alone. That is really what I want people to know, because
Yeah.
I felt so alone and so isolated when I was going through this with my daughter. And here I was in the public eye, right?
Mm,
And I mean, I tried everything. I tried invoking the law, and I go to court with her, and here it was me in my face. I mean, you understand what that's like. And
absolutely.
those were hard things to do, but there were so many other parents going through it, and I didn't even know, right? I had no idea that this was
Right.
as common as it is.
Yes,
So,
shame is what keeps us boxed in and
right.
isolated, and grateful that you chose to break out of that and to use your voice and your platform, your words and your wisdom, to put it out there. I know how scary that must have been. And I know that you have also faced just an onslaught of nastiness in the process. And yet,
Sometimes. Yeah.
yeah, and
I have to say about like 98% of the people are really positive and supporting.
yeah.
It's those, 2% out there that are horrible, that say the worst things. And,
Mhm.
they do it to get a rile out of you, and they hide behind social media. So it's unfortunate that people either don't want to or cannot accept addiction as a disease of the brain,
Mhm.
and they don't agree with getting people help. That I don't understand. Or they blame the parents for what
Mhm.
happens. It's so sad. But those voices are so loud, right?
Yes. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But you have to move
Yeah.
past them and remember that 98% are grateful for what you're doing, and think about the percentages that you are helping and saving. So that alone right there lets you tolerate the nasty 2%.
Right.
And, my
Right.
belief is that God deals with them. We don't have to. So, honestly, God bless you, Angela, for your heart, your compassion, your desire to help others, and your gift of journalism and discovery, for putting those two things together, information and the right messaging, to be able to touch and affect lives. I just want everybody to know, who's watching or listening, we will put your charity, your podcast, we will link to that. If anybody needs you and needs that resource, they'll be able to find you. And if somebody feels like they are at a critical moment in their time with their child, what should they do in that moment?
I think you always approach it from a standpoint of love. Get the resources. Call 988. You can find the resources in your community to help your
Mhm.
child.
Wonderful. Thank you, Angela. Appreciate you today. And I know many, many others do too.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.